Howdy, y'all. It's the Bouncing Around podcast. I'm Samson Folk. That's Evin Gualberto. We're here to talk about basketball in this great land of Earth. Land of Earth, commonly used term, a colloquialism of the folks, as it were. But anyway, we're talking basketball, league-wide, you know the deal. And as we do, we bounce around.
Won't stick, yo, and it's not his fault you kick slow. Shoulda let your chick hold your sick glow. Plus nobody couldn't do nothing once he let the brick go. And you know I know that's a bunch of snow. The beat is so butter. Peep the slow. Okay,
Evan. First things first. I cover a team called the Toronto Raptors. And I believe for the first time since 1991, in a move that included Pat Riley at the time, an assistant coach has been poached in the midst of a season. So Ryan Saunders of the Minnesota Timberwolves, formerly of the Minnesota Timberwolves, he's out of there. He's fired. Adrian Wojnarowski, comedically, there's humor to this, says they're not sure they're going to have an interim for the moment. 5 minutes later, Shams is like, Chris Finch is the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the interim was 5 minutes, I suppose. But Chris Finch has been plucked out of Toronto, is now placed in Minnesota. Karl-Anthony Towns. Finch is supposed to be a big whisperer. They ran a flare screen for Chris Boucher in the game against the 76ers. Hopefully some of that for Cat. What are your thoughts? I know you're very protective of coaches, so I don't know what you think of this.
Well, first, I mean, technically Woj wasn't wrong. Finch they never named an interim coach, immediately signed to a multi-year deal. So, I don't know where to begin. I still don't. I just have the words invert just racing through my brain because that's what I think is going to happen. If you don't know, viewer, listener, Chris Finch, I think the biggest deal was he was an assistant with Mike Malone in Denver when Jokic had his emergence. You can find Finch's Clinic on the Corner offense online just about anywhere. He's a guy who he will maximize. All right, I'll just say this real quick. In the description below, there is a link to a piece by Caitlin Cooper. It was in anticipation of when Finch was up for the Pacers job, and it goes into great detail about the things that you can sort of attribute to Finch as much as you can attribute to assistant coaches, because like trying to figure out who does what where and whose sets are whose, it's difficult. But when things start to look the same on different teams, that's when you kind of feel the assistant coach's influence. And so there are lots of similarities between what Jokic was doing in Denver the 1 year Finch was there, with what Boogie was doing when he was with Anthony Davis in New Orleans, and sort of what Zion ended up doing in his rookie year. So I think it'll be a good fit in terms of, we talked about this on the Wolves preview pod and also the Raptors preview pod, and I can link those below. But one of the best things that Cat does is he can play from multiple positions. He can pass from multiple positions. And we talked about how dangerous he would be if they unlocked him with inverted pick and rolls. So I can't imagine that Finch will shy away from using Cat as the hub of his offense.
I'm just excited to see what Cat does, because this is a stat I saw that in the 45 games the Timberwolves have played since trading for D'Angelo Russell, 5 of those have included games that they've actually played together. That's so dumb, dude. I hate that. Because you know what? Say what you will about D'Angelo Russell, and many do, but he's a fun offensive player. And him with Cat just run a bunch of funky stuff, put up some numbers. And Malik Beasley is having an insane year as well. Anthony Edwards did our guy Yuta very dirty with, quite honestly, one of the best in-game dunks I've ever seen. I think dunk of the year, dunk of the past couple of years, it's tough to conceive of a dunk that beats it. So he's there as well. They have McDaniels. McDaniels is Inspector Gadget with the Go-Go Gadget arms everywhere. And I got to tell you, they're an intriguing team. I'd like to see them do some fun stuff. And hopefully this opens the door for that. But on the other side of things, in the interest of a tight 35, I'll say this quickly. The Raptors lost their assistant coach in the middle of a season, who I think is largely responsible for a lot of the actions they were running on the weak side to preoccupy teams so that their primary actions could work properly, and their half-court offense, as a result, was significantly improved from years past, even after losing a guy like Serge Ibaka and a guy like Marc Gasol. That's all I'll say. Kind of sucks. For anybody, I'm an objective journalist, okay? I don't care whether the Raptors do good or not. I just cover them. But for somebody who did care, I feel like that would count. They would care.
I care a lot. And like I said, it's tough to attribute these things, but in the Raptors preview episode, I have a clip there of Chris Finch when he was still a New Orleans assistant, breaking down utilizing Zion in the mid-post area, and then they do a high split. But he talks about how you have to constantly keep the weak side moving so the defense is always engaged. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot of. I'm excited because there are so many tools that Cat has at his disposal. You talk about Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Culver, Okogie, all of these guys. Beasley quickly has become one of the better off-the-ball players in the league. He can use all of these players as weapons, in not necessarily in the same way that Jokic does, but you cut a little harder when you know that a guy can get you the ball. And that might be what we see happens with Minnesota.
Maybe they win the chip this year is what I'm hearing with this new hire. Yeah.
Yeah, easily. I mean, I can't imagine the play. People are saying the play-in is a long shot. Yeah, because, they're guaranteed a playoff spot is what it is.
That's right. Would they fall out of the top 6? After getting into it, of course. I doubt it. Do you see any ramifications for the Raptors? I guess it would probably be playoff stuff, right? If you had to project the Raptors not having Finch there for the war room stuff or from game-to-game adjustments, seems like that's the loss. Regular season, you run your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The hardest thing about this is that I would say right now, if this were a regular season, then you have the foundation for what you need because you have practice time and you build habits there, and you have these conversations. As coaches, you have these conversations of what do we do if, and I talk about this a lot. You want to make as many high stress and high level decisions in low stress situations. So you want to have the answers to questions you don't know are questions yet. But it's not a regular season, and what's done is done. So it's tough to project, but yeah, like you said, in the war room, in the film room, that's really where you're probably going to miss his presence.
I'll put a picture up on screen of he'll go right in between us, but the Raptors' new assistant coach, Giuseppe Paschetti. He looks like Kyle Lowry in an Italian mustache, but he is not, okay? He is Giuseppe Paschetti. Okay, Evan, this is the Bouncing Around podcast, but recently name changed to the Tight 35 podcast. In the interest of that, your game of the week, sir. I'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, I had the nationally televised Heat Warriors game. It was fun. I have a whole bunch of numbers that I want to get to right away, but the story of the game very simply, is Steph Curry was 5 for 20 from 3. He missed 15 threes, but he hit one with 2:26 left to play in regulation and a pair in the final minute of overtime. And we'll have this clip rolling too, is hits his first triple in overtime, and then he uses the threat of the pull-up. He rises up a little bit, which I believe gets Kendrick Nunn off his feet, and then he has a blow-by, drives into the lane, kicks, sprays it to Andrew Wiggins in the corner, who hits a 3, and then Steph closes it off with a 3. There's not a whole lot to say here besides the fact that 15 threes is, I mean, it's a lot of shots. And it's not as if I think even Spo would have to admit this, or I would like Spo to admit this. It's not anything they did that made him miss. He literally he either makes or misses, and he missed 15 threes. And we'll have the video going underneath this, but it's a bunch of relocation threes, it's a bunch of step backs, it's a bunch of him moving off the ball. It's not like they did anything. It's not like you can do anything but make life difficult, and they did. And credit to Steph Curry, who he kept shooting. He made them when it mattered. 2 in overtime, 2 in clutch time overtime.
Sounds like a hero. Sounds like a beloved player. Would you be surprised to find out that of the players in the NBA, he receives the most negative tweets at 27% of tweets that are at Steph Curry? 27% are negative. I think he's at somewhere he's also has the highest rating of positive tweets at him. So not a lot of people in the middle on Steph Curry. Nobody just Steph Curry doing his thing. Everybody's like, Steph Curry, you piece of garbage. You can't shoot, da-da-da. Or it's like, Steph better. Steph is the genius. He builds an offense around him. He makes it go. And I was surprised that Pascal Siakam wasn't one of the higher ones. But then I remembered they're not adding him. They're saying Beyblade or Spinball or something like that. So I was like, they didn't catch that. But everybody calls Steph. There's not a nickname for it. But
yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, would you be surprised to know that the most three-pointers Steph has ever attempted in a game is 20? He's done it twice.
That wouldn't be surprising. He doesn't have the trigger finger that his aim deserves.
I'm glad you said that. There are 11 instances in NBA history a player has attempted 21 or more threes. Of the 11, there are 8 players. One player appears on the list 4 times.
Oh my God, I love it. Who is it?
James Harden.
Yes, James.
I won't say I'll tell you the numbers later, but I want you to guess one more thing. Can you guess who has attempted the most three-pointers in a single game?
I feel like it's got to be somebody on a heater that is just somebody who I can't guess.
In fact, it was Klay Thompson. The game he broke the record. He had 14 of 24 from 3. Here's a fun one.
A lot of sense.
Here's the one I was super excited that I messaged you about off pod. Only 3 players on the list are from before 2018. Interestingly, all in April. Do you want to guess, or should I just lay it out?
You should lay it out. I'm disappointed because Gilbert Arenas won't be on there, but he should.
No. J.R. Smith in 2014 went 10 for 22 on three-point attempts against the Heat. J.R. was on the Knicks at the time. 10 for 22. Not bad.
Pretty good.
The second, the late, great Kobe Bryant in his swan song. He went 6
force.
Yep, 6 for 21 that night against the Jazz. You know, he ended with 60 points. Not a big deal, but yeah, 6 for 21. And Damon Stoudemire, Mighty Mouse. I don't have any clips for him, but I have a bunch of clips of him doing other stuff. But he went 5 for 21 all the way back in 2005. 5 for 21 against the Warriors, interestingly. Yeah, 5 for 21. Insanity.
I love that.
Yeah.
Damon Stoudemire. If he had just stayed with the Raptors, he would have won a chip in 2019 instead of asking to be traded. Damon, you could have been Udonis Haslam'd into a chip. Use your brain, Damon. Okay, so other stuff regarding this game, though. There has to be stuff outside of Steph Curry's. Yeah,
absolutely. We talked about this. One of the reasons you assigned it to me is because I love Spoelstra, and the stuff he was doing, the way he was using Duncan Robinson, not necessarily as a decoy, but I don't know what term you'd use for a guy who you use his gravity, but you're not really involving him in the action. There were reads and there were sets utilizing Duncan, but not necessarily for him, including there was one 40 seconds left in overtime, sideline out of bounds play. Jimmy Butler enters the ball to Bam in the high post, and then Tyler Hero sets a screen for Duncan Robinson all the way on the other side. We'll have this video to make it easier, but the Warriors are in hard deny on Duncan Robinson just about. So they use him, and so Bam just flows into a dribble handoff with Tyler Hero. And Tyler gets a clean look. He looks like he's about to rise up. So that makes Kelly Oubre, who's guarding Duncan, suck in a little bit. And that half second of sucking in leaves Duncan with just enough room. Hero gets him the ball. Duncan splashes it. It's just... And there are a whole number of different times where Miami just... The Bam Duncan two-man game, they use that to get Bam so many looks. It was a lot of easy inside looks for Bam, who went 10 for 16 in the game. Kind of uneventful. An unspectacular 10 for 16, but mostly because they were using Duncan as such a gravity-sucking force.
Defensively, what was the zone situation against Steph Curry? Because if there was a zone buster, seems like Steph is the guy maybe. And you got another overtime game. Look at that.
So it's not really, like I said, when you look at these Steph misses, they don't really come from, it looks like a matchup zone some of the time, but a bunch of his threes come in early offense. And so everybody's flying by at him, and he gets a couple of easy looks. There's really only, of the 15 misses, there's really only one heave, and that came at the end of the first. But the misses don't really, for the most part, they were playing man against him. They showed a few different coverages, but Steph is gonna do what Steph does. Many times it was early pick and roll, early drag, drive, relocate. He found space. It didn't really matter what they threw at him, but they did change up some looks.
I was really interested. That was maybe the number one thing I want to know about is the Heat, a very adaptable team. The zone, the inverted zone, you have a different term for it, but I'll call it the inverted zone, is one of the most interesting things they do. And to see them play it or not play it and be adaptable as they are against a player of Steph Curry's ilk, I think is one of the most fantastic aspects of that matchup. And an overtime game. Jimmy Butler played in that one, yeah?
Yes, he did. Draymond Green did not.
Thoughts on Jimmy? Because Jimmy has been back for a little bit now, and I'm a little bit interested.
So Jimmy had a so-so scoring game, but he did have a triple-double. People always, they're mystified by the triple-doubles. But Jimmy is another guy who was largely uncorked by how the Warriors were defending Duncan Robinson. So he was the third guy in a lot of the two-man action between Bam and Duncan, and he got a lot of brush screens, rub screens, whatever you want to call them. If you're Chris Webber, UCLA flex cut, whatever. He got a lot of that type of stuff. And 13 points doesn't seem like that big a deal, but it was a very easy 13 for him. No free throw attempts though.
My guy Jim Butler, no free throw attempts? He's no longer Jimmy if the free throw attempts don't come. He's Jim. Jim Butler is the version of Jimmy that doesn't get to the line. Norman Powell stole his powers, I guess. Is that the take?
He Space Jammed him.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's run with it.
Norman Powell Space Jammed Jimmy Butler. Any other thoughts on Warriors Heat?
I said this in the Warriors preview pod. Kent Bazemore was the man. The leading scorer for the Warriors off the bench, 10 for 19. He did Kent Bazemore-y things, and I just love it. I'm not right very often. I'll tell you that. But I was right about Kent Bazemore.
That was very Tobias Funke energy. There are dozens of us. Dozens. Okay. Kent Bazemore. I'm a fan. I was a fan early on. He was one of my favorite players on the 2014 Warriors, I believe, his rookie year when he played like 6 minutes a game. I liked it. I thought it was fun. The game you gave me, I liked it. I thought it was fun. Kyrie, out. Kevin Durant, out. James Harden, in it to win it. And they played the Suns, who had everybody, as far as I could tell. And here's the thing. The Suns are such a quality team. They do so much right that this game was very, very irregular for them because they just completely dropped the ball in minutes that they should have won. And by the end of the game, when James Harden was just breaking everything down, they needed to win those minutes. In the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, if you go a stretch where KD isn't playing, Kyrie isn't playing, and James Harden is off the floor, if you lose that stretch 18-13, you are in trouble and you set yourself up for James Harden, a mad dash to the finish line, and a triple in your defender's face as they go up 2 and eventually win the game. That's what you're doing. You need to be smart. And when you have Landry Shamet, Tyler Johnson, and Jeff Green just completely annihilating, disassembling your defense, whether it's in transition or the half court, I think you need to take a long look at yourself and say, we didn't bring the intensity. Because none of these guys by themselves are going to provide so many problematic advantages for your team that you have to throw your defense out of whack. It's just the help isn't coming soon enough. You're the guy who's guarding Jeff Green, who I love. I love Jeff Green. He's so great. But if Jeff Green is taking your guys off the dribble, your big man, you just need to sit a little bit lower, my guy. Like Jeff Green can hit threes, but he's not pulling up and just yakking threes on you. Landry Shamet, come on. Off the dribble, Tyler Johnson had a good game, and he has more skills than he typically shows. He has a lot in his bag. It's just consistency that's always marred his career. And he had a great game, I think, in this one. But to see those guys lead a charge back against the Suns, and the Suns are good. Like, the Suns were up 21 at halftime. That's the thing. They're up 75-54. Basically, all the regular trappings of a Suns game were there. You have the step-up screen into flare screen, flow into pick and roll, flow into dribble handoff, just stuff to completely shake Chris Paul, Devin Booker loose. They run the simultaneous flex and not UCLA, but horns. So they're running horns up top and they run flex on the bottom. And they're just seeing, is something going to shake loose? It's smart. It's diligent. It powered them to 75 in the first half. They dominated the Nets. And then, you know, and credit to the Nets, who DeAndre Jordan figured out the defense a little bit more in the second half, because it seemed like a lot of the action that the Suns were running was meant to target DeAndre Jordan. And I think a lot of teams do that. But when they're running all these actions, Jordan is kind of pacing back and forth, trying to track which side of the floor he's trying to cheat to. And he does this weird thing where as he's tracking, he's slowly moving backwards. And if you were going to face a team that you don't want to give the middle to, where they have two guys who could absolutely bludgeon you from the mid-range, I think it would be the Suns. And Yeah, so the Suns did a lot of great stuff. They dropped the bag in the second half. The defense they threw at James Harden, it's basically not going to be enough if James Harden is rolling. He got rolling. When they put Mikal Bridges, out there to guard Harden, and he's going full court pressure, they're just setting a screen in the backcourt, and Harden is getting a switch from there. You have to play better defense than that. Like, you have to be a little bit more diligent. But the Suns were allowing a lot of switches. And with James Harden, that seems like a huge problem. If it's the fourth quarter, and I understand DeAndre Ayton has come a long way defensively, and I think he's an above-average defender as currently constructed within their defense with his talents. But if you're letting him switch out onto James Harden at the end of the fourth quarter, what are you doing? You cannot, you have to scram. You have to figure out some way to get him off of that matchup. They didn't. James Harden got downhill. If he got downhill, he was getting fouled and finishing. If he didn't get fouled, he's just finishing. If too much help comes over, he's finding Tyler Johnson. He's finding Shamet. He's finding Green. He's finding a shooter. And then if they drop too low, if they try and get tricky around screens, the shot is going up. And that doesn't even take into account that Harden, for the most part, was pretty, as far as off ball, as much as I've seen him be off ball in recent years, pretty good in relocation. And the Nets, they played that 5-out style with Jeff Green. Green was one of the most important pieces, as I said, and Harden moved well within it. As far as I'm concerned, that was the Brooklyn Rockets that won that game because they just totally took on Harden's whole ethos, and they said, for this game tonight, Harden, please rewind the clock and get us through this game. They were down 21 at halftime. They turned it around. And so the Suns did a lot of great things, but they fumbled the bag in the non-Harden minutes, and then Harden just was a superhuman. He completely took over the game, couldn't be stopped, bent their defense to the breaking point repeatedly, and the Suns, they lost. And then the Nets went on to beat the Lakers and the Clippers, and they're just bludgeoning. I think they're 9-2 against the best teams in the league, against teams over 500, which is by far the best record. Although the next one is the Jazz, who are the above the break 3 champions. But that's my thoughts on the game, man. It was a hell of a ride. And as a James Harden fan, a fan of all lefties, I was very impressed with how the Nets came together and James to lead them.
Yeah, absolutely. Your point about the Brooklyn Rockets, outstanding. Because as I was watching it, the closing lineup they had, and not even the closing lineup, I believe DeAndre Jordan did not play in the fourth quarter. Is that right? Does that seem right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And so you were rocking with a lineup of roughly Jeff Green, Shamet, Harris, TLC, or Tyler Johnson. And you were just in a...
Chioza, too, yes. As well.
Yes, Chris Chioza. Yeah, former Rocket also. So you're just... Yeah, and also Jeff Green, right. So you're just rocking with that lineup, 5-out spread. I think I remember what you were talking about is they were so concerned with when James Harden gave up the ball, not being able to get the ball back to James Harden, that they conceded a wide open layup to Jeff Green in the final minute they didn't take the lead until the James Harden triple, but it brought them within 1. And so you have to sell out. When James Harden is cooking like he did, that's what you have to do. Unfortunately, when other guys are hitting also, there's really nothing you can do. And that's kind of what makes this Brooklyn team so dangerous, is that they have such a massive margin for error because their offense is so good if you just have one of those 3 guys. But if you have, we don't know what it looks like with Kevin Durant because we haven't seen him on this West Coast trip, I believe. But that's just what it is. They're so effing good on offense.
When I saw them against the Raptors and KD was doing his thing for however long, before getting pulled out of the game after they said you're not going to play. There's still just, it's all about discipline and recognition with that team, and will be, because when you're playing heliocentric basketball, there is discipline and recognition, but it's very just James Harden and the role players. And the role players all play a similar style. And James Harden plays his style. When he can take advantage, he does. That's what they did against the Suns. The way they came back into the game is they try and stack James Harden advantages on top of one another. Let him figure out how best to take advantage of the inherent advantages. With Kyrie, with KD, you have to be a little bit more discerning because you don't want to overload too much of the offense into one place. You want to be able to recognize who has the biggest advantage, who is in the best position to take advantage of something in the flow of the game. That's pretty tough to do. And to emphasize that on like 70 possessions of a game, pretty difficult. But that is, if the Nets figure that out for their offense, there's no doubt in my mind they would win the championship if they were figuring it out every trip down the court. Yes, this is what we're going to do. And they were really good at figuring out where they're going to attack. That's how you do it. And that's where their ceiling really lies. And of course, just better defense, which KD should help a lot when he's firmly back in the game. I mean, their defense wasn't very impressive in this one. There was some scramble aspect to it down the stretch. And, you know, they have gritty guys. When you're just playing role players, the defense becomes less of a thing because, yes, you're playing small, but the Suns were being put in a position where they weren't that comfortable just lobbing it to Ayton because they felt like they were getting steamrolled on the other end. You don't want to, when you're cut up in like a food fight, just the offense. It's tough to kind of slow the ball down and say, we're going to find Ayton. And if he misses on a post-up, you're not comfortable because you really feel like you wasted that possession. It's not correct. But on the psyche of players, when teams are playing up and down, if the Nets are scoring a lot on the other end, playing this pace and space style, and you toss it down to Ayton and he misses a bunny, you're just going to feel like we got to pace and space. We got to try and match him because we're getting steamrolled right now. And that's not correct, but that's how you feel in the game. And it's tough to fight that stuff back. And the Suns, even with Chris Paul, even with Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, they're on the bad end of it. And James Harden reigns supreme, dude. He was so impressive.
Yeah, the hardest thing, the best people in the league at it are, and have done it in the league, are Mike D'Antoni, James Harden, Steve Nash, and actually Chris Paul. But they exert their will on the game and they get you to play their style. And talk about this all the time with my players. You don't want to, I mean, you'd like to win regardless, but you don't want to play a game the other team's style unless you know you can do it better. And with James Harden, you're not going to do it better. With Kyrie Irving, with Kevin Durant, you will not be able to do it better. Phoenix, to your point, they closed the game out, I believe subbing out, who was it? Cam Johnson for Ayton. And so they went offense, defense in that way. And it was just, you know, you felt like it's what you had to do. And that's the trap that the Brooklyn Nets present, is they put you in this situation and you feel like there's nothing you can do but try to do it their way. And maybe you can win that way. And maybe you can. But put in the context of a 7-game series, you can't afford to lose you can't give up a game because you're playing their way. And that's what they'll do all regular season.
That's how the Rockets with Chris Paul and James Harden almost beat the Warriors. One of the greatest teams ever put together. To me, the greatest team ever put together, those Warriors. The Rockets almost beat them, a team they had no business beating, by taking that talent gap, the shot-making gap, and making it not about catch and shoot, but about isolation. And the game just got clunky. And it's like, when the game's clunky and it's gross, James Harden and Chris Paul in an isolation are two of the best guys to do it. Steph Curry flowing in the game is so, by a factor of 10, better than James Harden. But you slow that thing down, you make it all about just beating the guy, figuring it out from there. Chris Paul and James Harden, nobody does it better. So, yes, as you say, getting the other team to play your style, even if you don't end up winning, you're still accomplishing something. And that's what the Nets did. They got the Suns to play their style. The Suns moved away from a lot of what was working for them, and they lost the lead. Their defensive principles kind of went to the wayside because so many of the threes the Nets hit were just in transition or pseudo-transition where there's just a completely blown rotation on the sideline, and you're looking at a guy like Joe Harris or Tyler Johnson with so much space, like field of dreams amount of space. And that's just bad defense by the Suns, and it's because they're not comfortable. They don't want to play like that, but all of a sudden they're in this track meet, and they're not as good at it. They need to slow it down. They need to get back to Devin Booker, Chris Paul basketball, and they didn't, and they lost. And they're still such a good team. But the Nets, that adaptability is everything come playoff time, and the Suns will get better at it too. They'll be an adaptable team. They'll be really tough in the playoffs. But the Nets, for this game, they won. They did their damn thing. Like
I said, credit to the Nets staff for doing what they've done and utilizing their tools.
They'll never – I'm just impressed with that team. I hope I get to see them in person. I've said that beforehand. I'd like to see that trio when available. Maybe an East Coast road trip, and Evan and I link up and we do a game together or something. What's your dream game? Given the rosters currently in the NBA, what's your dream game today?
Because
if you could go.
Well, AD's out, so that wouldn't be probably Clippers Nets actually. So it's just I would imagine a contrast of styles. So
I think I would do Nets Spurs. I've seen DeMar in person before. I love watching DeMar work in person, and just it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote is standing off, and it's in the desert, Texas, let's say, and Wile E. Coyote is standing off there, and when he pushes down on the dynamite, Keldon Johnson explodes towards the bucket. I need to see the violent gather and finish that Keldon Johnson does in person, and to see it against Kevin Durant or something like that, all the better. And then DeJounte, Derek White, Lonnie Walker. There's so much good stuff with the Spurs. And, yeah, Spurs Nets, I think, would be my game.
That's solid. I mean, the answer will be Nets regardless. But let's say everyone healthy regular season, Nets Warriors, like a Clay, Steph, Draymond especially, going at Kevin Durant. That'd be amazing to watch. But in terms of, like, when things get tight, I would love to see an in-person something like Game 4 of Nets Heat, just because of a lot of adjustments are on the table at that point, and you start to kind of see the chess match going on. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah. Okay. Your game of the week, Evan, and I'm about to give it to you. Wednesday night, ESPN, Lakers, Jazz.
Ooh.
And I'm excited to see what you got from me.
Okay. All right. Wow. Lakers, Jazz. Oh, we'll know by then if Mike Conley's an all-star or if my heart is broken yet again.
Maybe that's something we'll talk about a lot. As you say, he was so good against the Lakers. They won because of him, and he's not in the all-star game. You burn it down.
Just throw out some. Game of the week is so hard to give you because I always want to give you either the Hornets or the Suns. Let's see here. Let's go.
I'm gonna guess what it is. Wait, give me the day you pick, and I want to guess what it is.
Wednesday.
Bulls, Wolves.
I was thinking about that. How about we go?
Raptors seat. I'll watch it. I'll be there.
It's no, I'm gonna give you what you asked for, man. I'm gonna give you Spurs, Thunder.
Ooh, Teo Maledon. Is he healthy? Is he playing? I hope so. I've been hearing a lot about this Maledon guy.
Here's what I know. Poku is doing some outrageous things in the G League. So
the behind the back, the pass going out of bounds the Magic Johnson. It's such a good gift. Oh my God. Okay. In the interest of Tight 35, Evan, how you feeling? Feel like a podcast?
I feel good, man. I feel like we got to all of the stuff we wanted to get to, and we went a little more in depth than we maybe should have.
Part and parcel of the Bouncing Around podcast. Bouncing, a synonym for digging deep, as everybody knows. Don't look that up. But, Evan, I'd like to thank you personally and very much for hosting this on your fantastic channel, which you've crafted over the years with hard work, sweat, and tears. I've been Samson Folk. It's a Bouncing Around podcast.
See ya.
See ya.
Parlami del Sud America.